Outlander Season 6, Episode 2. Let's get to it. The scene opens with Jamie and Ian riding towards a field. I believe it's the Indian reservation for the Cherokee. Jamie is acting as Indian agent, speaking with the chief. Chief is expressing his concern for the fact that the settlers in the area are crossing over into Indian territory, Cherokee territory, and hunting where they shouldn't be. The chief would like to be supplied with rifles to defend himself, and he believes this is a reasonable request as he has fought with the king before and is an ally. Jamie has reservations about supplying the Cherokee with guns, not knowing what side of the future battles that they will take. Ian is listening along and is paying attention to how his uncle is communicating with the Indians, neither promising them any rifles nor stating that he is outright turning it down. He's going to consider it. The next scene is Claire tending to Tom Christie's hand. She again is trying to convince him that she can make repairs to his permanently injured hand. He is still wary of allowing her to make any changes. Malva is listening to this conversation, and as she leaves, Claire tries to ease Tom Christie's concerns by letting him know that she has a new medicine that will allow him to sleep through the surgery. But he brushes this off and, again, is not too keen on having the procedure. After Claire is done seeing to Tom Christie's hand, she walks outside to find Alan and Malva tending to their daily chores. Malva expresses a desire to learn the medical trade, and Claire invites her to come along with her tonight to see Marcelly when she does her exam for her pregnancy. Alan lets Claire and Malva know that Malva has responsibilities there, and it doesn't look like she'll be able to attend. That night, Ian and Jamie both are staying at the reservation. Jamie wakes unexpectedly to a half-naked woman sitting astride him, and does his best to push her off without being rude, and sees there's another woman basically waiting her turn. After a little discussion, Jamie discovers that they feel it would be a great honor to spend the night with an agent of the king. Ian, of course, is enjoying this immensely and having a nice giggle at his uncle's expense. Ian attempts to explain to the ladies that his uncle is not allowed to share the bed of any other women by saying that his uncle has promised not to take a woman until he has provided rifles to the chief. The women leave reluctantly, and Ian has yet another giggle at his uncle's expense. Back at the settlement, Claire is with Marcelly, checking to see how her pregnancy has progressed. Marcelly is very tired of being pregnant and is very much looking forward to the birth date. She expresses that she's had some discomfort. Meanwhile, Malva walks in to see and learn. Claire sees a bruise on Marcelly's wrist, and you can see some concern. She continues with her examination and explains to Malva what she's doing as she goes on. Marcelly's children are, of course, playing outside and being a little bit rambunctious, so Claire turns to Malva and asks her to please go take care of the children, tend to them for a little while. And when Malva leaves, Claire takes this opportunity to ask Marcelly how things are going with Fergus. Marcelly admits reluctantly that they've had some pretty bad arguments, coming close to being physically problematic. The bruises are from him grabbing her, though it was because she threw something at him. Neither one of these is good things, and Claire is concerned, so Claire invites Marcelly to spend the rest of her pregnancy up at the big house so that she can be better tended to. It's then during this conversation that Claire and Marcelly discuss why Fergus has been drinking so much, why he's acting the way he is, and Marcelly tells Claire that Fergus feels responsible for the attack that happened at the end of the last season. Marcelly had been pushed to the ground, and Fergus just feels terrible that she had been hurt, that Claire's been taken, the entire situation. He feels great guilt. However, he also put some blame on Marcelly for working with Claire in the first place. If she hadn't been there, she wouldn't have been hurt. Later, we see Bree and Roger having a discussion in their home. She's got a jar of white phosphorus, and she explains to him that she has an idea of what she'd like to do. He expresses some concern, and she lets him know that she's being careful. and she's going to go invent matches. Roger informs her that a woman has died, and Tom Christie has asked him to preside over services at the funeral. Though the Ridge population is growing, they don't yet have a permanent minister, and Roger has agreed happily to serve in this capacity until a permanent minister has been sent and settled. We see Jamie coming home now. He's looking for his wife, who he misses very much. The next scene is a short clip away of how much he misses her. A lot of noise is made, and we see Mrs. Bug looking up at the ceiling, reminiscent of the first episode when Claire is with Frank at the bed and breakfast in Inverness. The next scene is Jamie and Claire together on the floor, just being themselves. But he has a question. Because of the Indian's request, he'd like to know more about the future. It's not something he wants to know, and Claire knows he never likes the answers, but he wants to make an informed decision, and the best way to get the information is his wife. The crux of his issue for Jamie is that he absolutely believes that a man should be able to defend themselves. And with so many settlers, the Indians deserve the ability to have the same defenses that the colonists have coming in. And while Jamie believes this, he does not want to arm what could possibly be a future enemy. Unfortunately, Claire does not have the information he needs. He just wants to know if the Cherokee are going to be on the side of the revolutionaries or on the King's side. And Claire's information just does not extend that far. Later on, we see Major MacDonald coming for another visit. It's this time when Jamie needs to convey the desires of the Indians to MacDonald, but Jamie doesn't say that they want guns. He says that they aren't quite sure what they want. Instead, Jamie tries to find out from the Major what in the past the Cherokee have done, how they have served. With this information, he's hoping he can make a better decision. He also lets Major MacDonald know what their concerns were of colonists coming onto their land and hunting. This is when the sneezing of Major MacDonald is just too much for him to take, and the Major excuses himself to get outside because Adso is apparently somewhere in the room and he can't breathe. During this time, when the Major's gone, Ian, who has been sitting in on this conversation, expresses to Jamie that the Indians said exactly what they want. They want guns. And Jamie's just afraid of saying it because they might get it without him knowing for sure if that's a good idea. We're at the funeral of Mrs. Wilson, where Roger is presiding. Things seem to be going well until Jamie notices that Mrs. Wilson is breathing. And that's generally not what you find in a corpse. So after a few moments of a bit of hysterics within the room, Claire reveals to Roger that most likely Mrs. Wilson had an aneurysm, a slow enough bleed that she appeared dead. However, she was still alive and unfortunately only had minutes left. The woman takes this opportunity to be her worst self, yelling at her son for not putting on the brooch she had wanted to wear to her burial. He had not prepaid the Sin Eater, which is apparently a great offense. And Roger had to break up a fight at a funeral between the person being buried and their loved ones. In the end, she told her son that he was a good lad. The Sin Eater had eaten her sins, so she was free to go up in heaven. And moments later, she was finally dead. Then Roger picks up his Bible, and begins the sermon as though nothing had happened at all. That evening, back at the big house, Mrs. Bug is serving dinner to the family, including Marsley. Mr. Bug is on the floor playing with the young'uns while the adults have a nice meal. The only one absent is Fergus still. During the meal, Bree says she has an announcement. Everybody misunderstands what the announcement is. They're ready to toast to the newborn baby that will be coming in 9 months. However, Bree says, no, I've created something. And she demonstrates this match. However, no one's really all that impressed. Marsley compares it to Flint. In the end, her parents congratulate her for her ingenuity. Hopefully, in the future, we will see how this comes into assistance because it's sort of sad that nobody got excited about it. Claire then congratulates Roger for the way he handled the disruption at the funeral. Roger again says that he's happy to fill in as a minister. However, because of what happened today, Claire has been asked not to return to the church. She has been deemed a witch once again. As they're talking, this is when Marsley goes into labor. She says it does not feel quite right, and Marsley is quickly moved into the clinic. We see Claire giving her medications, home remedies to try and quicken the labor. It's been several hours since the labor pain started, and they've all but stopped. Claire's visibly concerned. Jamie asks what can be done, and Claire says she could do a C-section. However, that would save the baby and most likely kill Marsley. Of course, they're still trying to figure out where is Fergus, and Jamie says he's going to send Roger off to go find Fergus, but he can't really understand why he isn't there now. This is when Claire tells Jamie what it is Marsley had told her earlier about Fergus's guilt. Roger has found Fergus. He's sitting in front of a fire having a drink, and Roger lets him know that Marsley is in labor currently. Fergus says, well, Claire will be able to take care of it, and Roger gives him a talking to. In the end, Fergus does get up and heads to see his wife. When we next see Marsley with Claire, she is concerned with the fact that she may die soon. Things just don't seem right. And she wants to be able to write to her mother. Claire lets her know that she will be fine. She's going to do everything she can. And while Marsley has great faith in Claire's abilities, she wants to write a letter to her mother, just in case. And Claire says if it'll help her feel better, then that's what she should do. Thankfully, this is when Fergus comes in. He can see his wife is having a terrible time, and so he immediately goes to try a trick that he learned in the brothel growing up to demonstrate to his wife, and Claire excuses herself. The trick to help bring on labor is to stimulate his wife, and Claire doesn't need to be here for that, so she leaves and goes to sit with her husband, Malva, who is out waiting in case there is any extra attendance needed for Claire, and Bree. A few moments later, the sounds coming from the clinic are obviously not about labor, so Jamie and Bree excuse themselves with other very important things they are going to have to go do instead of listening to that. And Claire has a nice moment with Malva, who is confused, who is unaware of the fact that relationships between a man and a woman can be actually pleasurable for the woman. And after a moment, Claire makes it clear that when people love each other, that is exactly how it should be. Bree is walking into the stables now. She sees Ian, who is saying a little prayer for the baby. He's obviously concerned for Marsley, and he takes the opportunity of Bree walking in to ask her some questions about the future of the Indians. From what his uncle says, things might not go as well as he hopes. When Bree lets him know that it will be the United States of America that will be created, he holds hope that that means the Indians will be included. She has to be honest and informs him that is unfortunately not what will happen. And he again feels great guilt. And he feels guilty because he knows that he will be a part of that future regardless. He's already sworn that he will stay by his uncle's side. And then the baby makes an appearance. It's a boy. He's healthy. Fergus is introduced to his son. For a moment, everything seems quite right. Fergus seems himself. Marsley and he seem themselves together. And then Fergus notices that the baby has been born a dwarf. He leaves the room. Marsley hadn't known that the baby was a dwarf, but the moment she's told, it doesn't even matter. Her baby is healthy, her baby is here, and she loves her beautiful boy. Later on, Roger and Bree are in their cabin, and Roger is really proud of his wife for her invention. Though she feels a little bit bad that it wasn't taken with more excitement, she feels worse that the other news wasn't true. They have been trying to have another baby, and so far, no success. But she says that they've decided to stay here, and patience is part of that life. This is when there's a knock at the front door. When they open the door, they reveal Aidan standing there, who has been lost in the woods, but knew their cabin well enough to find them. Aidan is one of the two young children of the widow that Roger and Bree intend to help build a cabin for. So Roger offers to go help Aidan find his way back. But before they go, Roger shows the young boy his wife's new invention, who is very impressed with the miracle that is a fire that comes from a stick. In the morning, Mr. Bug is heading out, I suppose, to town to run errands. Jamie asks him to check for mail from his aunt, and Kezzy is going with Mr. Bug, and Lizzie gives him a farewell and tells him that he'll miss him and that she'll be happy to keep an eye out for his brother while she's gone. Next, we see the Indians have come to visit Fraser's Ridge up at the big house, and they would like to know if Jamie passed along their request, and Jamie can tell them that he has not. Ian sees the exchange and tells his uncle that he feels that the Indians should be able to defend themselves. And if his uncle isn't going to get the rifles for them, Ian will figure out a way to get them. Just out of the rain, Bree and Jamie are sitting on the front porch. She is discussing with her father the progress that the Fisher folk have made on their building. Tom Christie in particular has made great progress, and Jamie goes to check it out. He finds that the cabin Tom Christie has been building is not a cabin, it is the church. This is when Jamie takes the opportunity to remind Tom Christie of the relationship they had back at Ardsmuir. And Jamie says this isn't going to be just a church. It's going to be a meeting house, basically as they treated Ardsmuir as a lodge. Instead of this being a church for just one religion and one group of people, this will be a place where everyone on the ridge is free to come. Every man, woman, and child, including Claire. And there will be no more hints that Claire is a witch. Tom Christie reluctantly is in agreement with this. However, he asks about the steeple. Jamie allows him to keep the steeple. That way they can ring it when there are meetings, and all who want will be able to attend. Tom is now not all that pleased, and he walks back into his tent camping area to find Mulva. He wants something to be angry at and finds that the milk is sour. Throws it on the ground, blames Mulva as she's cleaning it up, complains that these things wouldn't happen if she hadn't been wasting her time with Claire, says that she's turning into her mother, which I'm assuming is a bad thing, and begins to undo his belt so that he can whip her. Unfortunately, the damage to both of his hands makes whipping anybody pretty much impossible, and Mulva is left kind of smiling, knowing that she is getting a reprise from the punishment he had hoped to dole out. Now, in this scene, we see Ian with the new baby, Henry Christian, and Marsley. And it's during this moment that Ian reveals that he too has a child. And that's really all we hear. However, you can tell that it's a painful thought, a painful memory. Something happened. The fact that there is no child with him now means that at the very least he had to leave his child behind. And so he gives this child a blessing, basically saying that may he always be provided for. May the earth give him what he needs. May he always have what is necessary for his happiness. Now we find that Tom has decided that he must have at least one working hand, and he comes up to Claire and says that if God has put her there, he must want her to repair his hand. However, Claire says that she is happy to do it, just not now. The other hand must heal completely before she can begin surgery on the other. And in our final scene, we find Claire walking in the evening, wrapped in her blanket or cloak. Jamie is sitting at his desk writing a letter, and she asks who he's writing to. He's writing to the governor. She sees that he's decided what he will and will not ask for, and he tells her that he is going to make a request for the rifles and anything else the Cherokee asks for, because he had been standing outside of the house and had overheard Ian admit that he has a child. I think Jamie now sees that from Ian's point of view, his family are on both sides of whatever might be happening if the Indians took the side of the king. No matter what, Ian wants his family protected, and that includes any Indians. And it's not the Cherokee, but it represents the Indians and the family that he did leave behind. Jamie lets Claire know this is why he's made this decision. He's been well informed on all sides as best as he can be about who's involved and what may happen in the future. And when it comes right down to it, his feelings are the same as they always have been. Everyone deserves the ability to protect themselves. And right now, the Indians do not have the ability to protect themselves on encroaching settlers. If you liked my overview of Outlander, Season 6, Episode 2, don't forget to like and subscribe.